everybody, and welcome to the Hutchins Center's Alum Fellows Reading Series, at which former fellows discuss recent works. And today we're delighted to welcome back Alum Nazir Fellow, Regina Bradley. We're also excited to have with us another Alum Naz Fellow, Bettina L. Love. Dr. Love is the Athletic Association Endowed Professor at the University of Georgia. Her award-winning writing, research, teaching, and advocacy work meet at the intersection of education, abolition, and Black joy. The creator of the hip-hop civics curriculum, Get Free, Dr. Love is also the co-founder of the Abolitionist Teaching Network, which facilitates teachers and parents' battles for justice in their schools and communities. Her writing has appeared in all the major journals in the fields of her interest, and she's the author of the books We Want to Do More Than Survive, Abolitionist Teaching and the Pursuit of Educational Freedom, and Hip Hop's Little Sister Speak, Negotiating Hip Hop Identities and Politics in the New South. And we hope to have her return to us to discuss her work at a future session of this series. Thank you, Bettina Love, for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much. We are both delighted to be back. Regina and I can both say how much we enjoyed our time at the center. And just to be back and having this conversation, because we were fellows when you were writing this book and cursing out this book and talking about this book. And so I am beyond delighted to be with you today to have a beautiful conversation about this extraordinary book. So before I read your illustrious bio, just say hello to the people.
What's going on, everybody? It's good to be back at Harvard. Thank you.
All right. So let me tell y'all who you have in front of you. Dr. Regina N. Bradley is an alumna of the Nasir Jones Hip Hop Fellow at the one and only Hutchinson Center at Harvard, spring 2016. She is an assistant professor, but very newly minted associate professor of English and African diaspora studies at Kennesaw State University, and the co-host of the critically acclaimed Southern hip hop podcast, Bottom of the Map, with music journalist Christina Lee. Dr. Bradley is one of the foremost authorities on contemporary Black culture in American South. Her expertise and research intersect. Interests include civil rights, African American literature, hip hop culture, race in the contemporary US South, and Southern sounds. Dr. Bradley holds her PhD. Well, let me make sure. She holds her BA first. And I know I can't say it right. Albany State. There you go. State. And her PhD from Florida State University. We are here to talk about her unbelievable book, Chronicling Stankonia, The Rise of Southern Hip Hop. Her work has appeared in NPR, Washington Post, Atlanta Journal-Constitution. 2017, she did this unbelievable, brilliant TED Talk called The Mountaintop Ain't Flat. And it talks about the significance of hip hop and bridging that with the American South. Her work has appeared in numerous journals. One of my favorite short story collections is her 2017 book, Boondock Collage, with some of my favorite stories. She knows there's one story I just want her to tell over and over again. She is just a force. And this book is just a beautiful collection of her unbelievable thoughts. You're just an amazing thinker when it comes to hip hop and Southern hip hop. And I'm excited to have this conversation. But before we begin this conversation, Dr. Bradley is going to read for us a little bit from this amazing book. So you take it, sis.
Appreciate you, Be Love, as always. Again, thank you all so much for giving us a little bit of your time on this Good Friday. So I tried to figure out what I wanted to read. And I guess what I'm gonna end up doing is telling the story about why Outkast is so important. And for those that know me, moving to Albany was a big deal for me. Talking about the South is an even bigger deal for me. But chronicling Stankonia is definitely a critical love letter to the place that made me the person that I am today. So I'm going to read a little bit from the introduction, and then definitely get into this conversation with Tina, because as she said, I was writing this when I was a fellow, so this makes this event even more special. So again, thank you for this opportunity. Well, radio mixtapes were still an art and currency in 1998. I meticulously listened to the radio, careful to avoid recording commercials and to leave just enough quiet space to move from track to track. Among my favorite tracks was Goody Mob's Black Ice. Besides the bass kick, high electric guitar notes, and organ reminding me of a gospel song, the swishing sound reminded me of the cicadas that sung from the treetops outside my folks' house. We lived in the country, outside of Albany's city limits. The cicadas would sing loud enough that at moments they harmonized with the swishing on the Black Ice track. Additionally, Black Ice was the first time I took a hard listen to Outkast. The swagger of Antoine Big Boy Patton and Andre 3000 Benjamin's effortless yet layered cadence jumped from the track. I fell in love with their voices because they melted and eased into my ear like the voices of my classmates. However, it wasn't until marching band camp at my school, Westover High, that I truly became outcasted. While marching band didn't pan out, I ended up being a solid equipment manager for the season. My interaction with Rodney, a senior and one of the trumpet section leaders, jump-started my love for Outkast. During lunch, I found Rodney cross-legged and silently tapping his fingers against his leg and trumpet. He nodded spontaneously and scribbled on a sprawl of papers in front of him. When I got closer, I heard a soft hum that he emphasized at the end by poking the pencil in the air in front of him. Hi, Rodney, I squealed with a little bit too much enthusiasm. He didn't raise his head from what he was doing. Oh, hi, what you doing? Transcribing this song for the stands. Stand music was the popular music played by the band and heard on the radio between plays after the band's formal show at football games. Rodney goes back to humming. What song is that? Spodiodopalicious. I muster up enough courage to ask him one more question. Who's it by? Rodney looked up with an annoyed expression on his face. I couldn't tell if it was because I was bothering him while he was transcribing or because I was a freshman. It was probably both. Outkast. Oh, that's tight, I squeaked. Rodney didn't respond. The silence was my cue to get going. I would have other daily encounters with Outkast in high school, such as through my friend Brandon, a then aspiring MC who would blend riffs and own rhymes with Outkast music. For example, while the rest of the class found Brandon's sudden use of Andre's ending bars from Cool Breeze's song Watch for the Hook an amusing start to the beginning of the final Spanish exam, our teacher did not, and chided us in English and in Spanish. Outkast, along with an army of Southern artists behind them, introduced me to the post-civil rights era South, and above all else, that contemporary Southern culturescape was distinctively and intentionally grounded in hip-hop. Hip-hop was my means of personal and cultural transition into being Southern, and it was not until a decade later would I find the language to articulate or recognize that my fondness of Southern hip-hop and Outkast was a segue into the larger question of where the South fit into not only hip-hop culture, but contemporary American society in general. The Black American South seldom has room to expand past three major historical touchstones: the antebellum era, Jim Crow, and the modern civil rights movement. Non-Southerners take comfort and pleasure in being able to restrict Black identities to these markers of Southernness because of their accessible narratives, romanticization in mainstream American culture, and lagging agency outside of a white imagination. In the same way that the American South embraces being a regional poltergeist, living with and benefiting from the haunts of the past, Southern Black folks too are haunted by white people. Southern Blacks are expected to cower in the shadows of racism, succumb to their believed innate backwardness, and live in daily terror for simply being Black in the South. They are seldom viewed as their own complex and autonomous selves. And without question, Black folks are believed to fall in with Southern white experiences. This extends from the antebellum era into modern times, as Southern Blacks continuously fight to carve room for themselves to speak their truth to power. Even amid the struggles of the 20th century civil rights movement, itself an effort to depart from white supremacy and the socio-cultural constructs that supported it, white folks and their reactions were not far from center. The legibility of Southern Black respectability politics aside, the movement sustained itself across the region, both because of the promise of Black civil rights and the hope of white folks' assimilation into the effort that these rights would be better for everyone. However, after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the collapse of a perceived monolithic Black leadership, the coordinated efforts of the movement broke down into localized attempts that by themselves did not sustain the interest of national news media, Black or white. And this was especially true in Albany, the peculiar jewel of the civil rights movement that forced Dr. King to reconsider his blueprint for racial equality. And although my grandparents didn't participate on the front lines of the movement, they knew people who did. And they contributed to the cause through other means, such as making protest posters, donating money, or providing brown bag lunches. Further, it was not uncommon that teachers and elders who participated in the movement were still living in Albany, such as Rutha Mae Harris, who taught special education at Monroe Comprehensive High School, or the late Dr. Janie Rambo, who taught French at Westover High. Landmarks were also important during the Albany movement. For example, the Albany Civil Rights Museum on Whitney Avenue was repurposed from its use as a church headquarters to be used for marchers and protesters. Without fail, every time we drove past the museum, my grandparents would point to it and Shiloh Baptist Church across the street and say, when Dr. King was here, he would walk back and forth across the street to speak to both churches because all the people couldn't fit into just one building. And although I would nod and say, yes, ma'am, or yes, sir, out of respect, it was fleeting in my mind because I did not feel an attachment to the movement with the same fervor and depth that my grandparents and elders did. However, what went unsaid was very much a part of my daily experiences. Albany's high unemployment rate, the threat and fear of becoming a teenage mother or high school dropout, racial profiling, and the rap music that spoke to these socioeconomic conditions daily. In my mind, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. held space along the Atlanta rapper Pastor Troy, who proclaimed "Animal Play in GA" and dubbed himself the leader of the wicked church. And while Troy's imagery certainly subverts the Southern tradition of the Black church as epicenter of protest and change and its associated respectability politics, there is also an awareness that he too is speaking truth to power, albeit with more bass kicks and synthesizers than a church organ or the traditional percussive clapping of marchers or a church congregation. What Southern hip hop realized and older generations wanted to tone down was that Dr. King's mountaintop was not flat. Chronicling Stankonia interrogates the cultural expressions of the post-civil rights hip hop generations, Black Southerners who are twice removed from the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s and its immediate aftermath in the early 1970s. Specifically, I'm interested in excavating the experiences of Black Southerners who came of age in the 1980s and 1990s and use hip hop culture to buffer themselves from the historical narrative and expectations of civil rights movement era Blacks and their predecessors. I theorize this sociocultural landscape as the hip hop South, a hodgepodge of past, present, and future narrations of Southern Blackness. The hip hop South combines cornerstones of the past using hip hop to carve out a space where the complexity of experiences in the post-civil rights era can breathe. The contemporary Black South remains uncharted terrain. Southern hip hop deromanticizes the mountaintop as prime real estate and works it for what it is, an entanglement of race, place, and privileged memories that attempts to thwart the ideas and reflections outside of a suitable Southern spectrum that remains closely tied to the socio-historical boundaries of a Southern imagination. The hip hop South carves out room to work through the challenges of existing and the most recent cycles of the post-civil rights South. So, for the introduction.
You better talk about it.
Beloved.
You better talk about it. That was just absolutely gorgeous.
I try to be great, you know what I'm saying?
What I love so much is the weaving of your own story.
Mm.
I love a Rodney being annoyed with you.
Yes.
Right, like he's annoyed, and why he should be annoyed. Like I got the new heat, and here you come, a freshman, with these annoying questions.
Shoot my shot, okay? I had to shoot my shot. He was by himself, you know, the level of embarrassment was a little lower, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, but yeah,
I love that story being your introduction.
Thank you.
To this world of hip hop. And it's, for me, hip hop, particularly our generation, right? It's so much about the lunchroom. It's so much about the cafeteria. It's so much about those spaces where we are all cramming around. Like, what he say? What they say? What she say? Like trying to hear that music at that time. So you just brought me back to that time in the lunchroom, in the cafeteria, huddling around, and heaven forbid somebody got something new you didn't have.
Listen, and you try to be part of the conversation though, beloved. Like you trying to come up here and talk about it and you ain't listening to nothing but the radio singles.
I mean, these were just beautiful times and it just brought me back. But let's get into the book, because I think what you do so brilliantly is that you're such a beautiful storyteller on top of being just your theory type.
Appreciate you.
And that's what I love about this book. It's you. And you're weaving these stories in between beautiful narratives and then other people's work, which we'll get into in a second, because, yeah. So talk to us, you end the book with the South got something to say.
True.
So what does the South have to say, and why the South? Why hip hop? And I know you get this question a lot. And so
my favorite question.
Let's just go right from the start. Why Southern hip hop? Why the South?
Yo, because the South is where it's at. I just wish I could just say that and just like drop the mic, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, no, I feel like, as somebody who is a hip hop scholar, and is from the South, like generations deep from the South, you know what I'm saying? It bothered my spirit, you know what I'm saying? To borrow from my beloved Nana Boo, there was something in my spirit that every time we had conversations about hip hop, they were never from a Southern perspective, like ever, you know what I'm saying? And I know that you're from the Rock, like we've already established that, and I'm honorary from the Rock because, by association. But yo, like I just got tired of hearing about New York, to be 100 with you. Like I was like, how do we have more in-depth conversations? Because one, Northeastern stigma is still associated with how we talk about the South. You know what I'm saying? The idea that Southern Black folks are backwards and don't know how to appreciate the sophistication of hip hop culture. You know what I'm saying? Like one of the things I often joke about with students is like, you meet somebody from New York, they're like, yo, I got to listen to the lyrics first, son. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, boo. Like down here, if the beat don't hit and it don't make my trunk shake, I'm not going to give it a serious listen. You know what I'm saying? So it was just important for me to establish an epicenter of research that showed Southerners can think thoroughly and deeply about the impact of Southern rap as a culture, not just the music. Like, it was like, we have to understand in the same way that folks are like, oh, no, hip hop is more than just rap, right? Like you think about the 5 pillars of hip hop, those same pillars exist below the Mason-Dixon line. You know what I'm saying? And I think that is important to actually include the people who are progressing the conversation and progressing the culture forward. And I didn't see that as much as I would like to. So ultimately, Chronicling Stankonia was a show and prove. You know what I'm saying? Like y'all want to say like, oh, we don't know how to talk about Southern rap. I gave you a full manual, 100-something pages of how to talk about Southern rap. You know what I mean?
And let's not forget, you also have Outkast Reader.
Yes, that's coming soon.
So that the body of work.
It's expanding, shouting. It's expanding, Dr. Love. Yes.
And so let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that was one of the things that really jumped out at me is when you talked about the Black American South seldom has room to expand behind these 3 historical touchstones, right? The antebellum South, the Jim Crow, and the modern civil rights. And I think that is so true. Even the way we teach, listen, like here was slavery, here was Jim Crow, there was King, and then Obama came. Like there's nothing. It's like, what happened to all my people here? And so I think that's why this book is a disruption of that. So just talk about that, because I think when you think about the South, you hit it right. It's those 3, and we don't move past. Like for many people, and then you talk about, you move down on that page 4 to the white imagination. So the South just stays in like 1959, like the South just,
Howdy.
right? And what that does.
Man, okay. So, I feel like I say this every time I have this conversation. I am not negating the contributions and what the civil rights movement era folks did. I am not negating that. What I am negating is the understanding that the movement is the apex of Southern Black modernity. Because if it was the apex of Southern Black modernity, then your girl would still be up in here trying to be like, I really want to be like Rosa Parks instead of I really want to be like Trina. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's just, and part of that is because I don't know, man, it's complicated. It's like, on the one hand, folks are comfortable with thinking about the South as a historical mindset. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? It's easy, right? It's like, oh, well, the Southerners is always thinking about the history. And we don't necessarily make it easier for people who ain't from here. You know what I mean? Like, every year we have Civil War reenactments. We're currently battling with, the Confederate monument thing. You know what I'm saying? And folks want to talk about heritage. But I'm like, it's not heritage if the monument was built and usually haphazardly built, talking to my historian friends, in the early 20th century as a representation of why white supremacy still represents the Confederacy. We don't want to have that conversation yet. You know what I'm saying? Instead, we like to focus on, well, you had the movement, didn't you? Like, right. I will never forget, I was in Houston, beloved. I was in Houston having a conversation about Southern rap, and an older white woman walked up to me and was like, why are you so angry? And I'm like, what? I'm like, well, I have home training. So I was like, ma'am, like, what? She was like, why are you so angry at the movement? Like, we did so much for you all. And I'm like, yes, but it didn't fix everything. That's the thing I want to move away from. Is I want to continue to pay homage to those who marched, who protested, who made change. I also want to move away from the fact that they are the only representation of contemporary Southernness, because that don't exist. So like you said, if Southern modernity stops in 1968, what do you do with those of us who was born like me in 1984 or 1990s or the early 2000s? There's no language in place. There's no contextual framework. So it's like when Andre walks out to the Source Awards, which once upon a time was like the hip hop Bible, you know what I mean? You saw who was on the front, you were like, oh, okay, boom, boom, boom. And then you automatically go to the back. Let me see how they rating some of this music that's coming out. You know what I'm saying? And Andre comes out at the 1995 Source Awards and to a booing New York crowd. I still can't forgive Salt and Pepper for this either, by the way. I don't appreciate that. As much as I love Salt and Pepper, I don't like how they were just like, I don't care. It reminds me of like when you go to the club and then like the girl don't really want to holler at you. So then she be like, right? It's just the stank face. I don't like that shit. I was like, okay, I will never. Anyway, comes out there, crowds booing, you know what I'm saying? And then Big Boy is the biggest instigator in hip hop, even bigger than Joe Budden. Cause dude said, so what's up? Which if you have Southern sensibility, you're like, oh shit. He's like, talk your shit. Andre come up in there and he was like, it's like this though. And I was like, oh, he big mad. You know what I'm saying? He was like, he was tired of folks being closed-minded and he was nervous and he was anxious. You could tell because he's an introvert. So, being in front of all them people, he's like, I'm already tired of y'all already. And he's like, the South got something to say. He didn't say Atlanta got something to say. He didn't say Outkast got something to say. He didn't say Georgia got something to say. This man said, the South got something to say, which for those of us who were below the Mason-Dixon line, we were like, oh, okay, it's on and popping, like kick the door open, never look back. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's important that hip hop in the South takes root in such a way that it bridges the past and the present. You know what I'm saying? A lot of artists talked about the movement because we can't get away from it. We're in the shadow. We are forever in the shadow, especially those of us who live in Georgia. We are always in the shadow of the civil rights movement. We can't get away from that shit, right? But it's also like an opportunity to think about this is what futurity can mean for Southerners. And Southerners are always thinking about the future. Like I've been saying more recently, you know what I mean? Southern Black folks are always time traveling, always.
Yeah.
Always, right? From funk to hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
Your Sun Ra's, you know what I'm saying? Your George Clinton in the Parliaments, all of your Brick, all of your folks who are recording funk music, which was the music of futurity for my daddy.
Yeah.
Laid the groundwork for hip hop to be the music of the future for me. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I mean, just like it's being able to connect them dots. You know what I'm saying? So being able to have this type of conversation. So hip hop's important.
So why Outkast, right? So it could have been Phil Mob, could have been Goody Mob.
Right? You don't want to talk no Phil Mob today. You don't want to talk no Phil Mob.
It could have been Goody Mob, right? It could have been like, why Outkast?
Outkast paid the dues, shawty. Outkast paid the dues that Southern rap was its own thing. And they are not the first Southern rap group. I'm not going to sit up here and be like, they was the first ones. Y'all not going to come for me in the DMs or on the Twitters, okay? That's not what I'm saying. Because you can go as far back as the Ghetto Boys. You know what I'm saying? Probably even further than that. But Outkast went on a national stage as Southern rap artists who were produced by Southern producers, pulling from Southern shit.
And Southern sound.
The signature Southern sound that you get with organized noise.
Right.
They were like, we ain't trying to sound like nobody else but us.
Mm-hmm.
They paid the dues. And you mean to tell me ain't nobody talking about them at length in hip hop studies?
Yeah.
Go now, go.
So we have a song as on page 11 that we share. That was really my introduction to Outkast. And that was, you need to get up, get out, and
get some.
Don't let the days of your life pass by. You need to get up, get out, and get something. Because you and I got to do for you and I. And that, when I heard that, I was 16 years old. My life was in shambles. And I had stolen my brother's tape. And because my father was Southern. And so Outkast was this introduction to explain who my father was to me. I didn't know this Southern man. We lived in upstate New York, but my father, fish and grits. My father had a baby blue Cadillac. There was nobody in upstate New York with a baby blue Cadillac walked around with flip-flops and socks. Like who was this man? And then I heard Outkast. I was like, oh, this is the South.
What's your daddy from Duval? He from Jacksonville.
You know it. Jacksonville, Florida. My father thought he was James Brown.
Duval. Yeah.
But when I heard Outkast for the first time, it was just a remembering of what that place was that I didn't know and I'd heard so much about. And you're right, it was through a white imagination. It was through those touch points. But then I heard these young men who sounded like my father and brother, who were talking and dressing like my father and brother. And they had this sound that I heard in my childhood that they have brought up that sonic sound. Right. And then for them to tell those stories that I think cut across everybody. That's why hip hop, that's why Outkast goes global, right? Because they start, when you start breaking down what CeeLo says, I don't recall ever graduating at all.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel I'm just a disappointment to y'all.
Stay with that line right there because you break it down in the book. Why is that so important?
Because he is disrupting so many narratives that older generations of Southern Black folks have instilled in young Southern Black folks. For me, as the granddaughter of educators, my grandparents integrated the Doherty County school system in the 60s. You know what I'm saying? So it was like, ever since I could remember, it was always, you got to get your education. Education is the opportunity to access it for you to be successful. You know what I'm saying? But the other part of that they don't talk about is, give me something to brag on at church on Sunday. You know what I'm saying? Like, I remember being in graduate school and like coming to visit, going home to visit Nana Boo and them and going to church. And then my grandma was like, stand up and tell them what you're doing. Stand up, say something smart. Say something smart. So, so it was like, it was an opportunity to brag.
Yes,
like, you know what I mean? Because in my grandmama's mind, it was like I was representing for the family. I wasn't just representing for me. And it's like my grandbaby is working on her PhD. What's your grandbaby doing over there at McDonald's? She was like, my grandbaby is working on her PhD. And then, then they want to compare notes, you know what I'm saying? So it was a bragging right. I was like, okay. So when CeeLo was like, sometimes I don't even, recall graduating at all. It's like he completely throws out that narrative that you have to graduate to be something.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was the line. He's like, sometimes I feel I'm just a disappointment to y'all. Like the anxiety around that, you hear it in his voice. Mm-hmm. Like, I know that y'all expect me to do better, be better. This idea of exceptionalism as the norm. Mm-hmm. And to not meet that goal, not meet that line of being celebrated. You know what I mean? Like, nobody do graduation like Southerners.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead and talk about it.
Listen, let me tell you something. Because it's almost like the family reunion. It is a week-long celebration. That week you about to graduate, that's when your people start to come down. They got their little announcements with them, with your little name in cursive, Regina Nicole Bradley. Oh, I'm sorry.
I've never seen this and I moved to the South. Like,
let me tell you something. Regina Nicole Barnett. And usually it's like honor graduate. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Westover Comprehensive High School.
In the lawn, you got a lanyard. You got it in the lawn. You announce it. I've never seen this.
No, not even in the lawn, shot. You have it in the newspaper. Because I know it exists everywhere else, but in Albany and pretty much everywhere else in the South, bet money, you got two newspapers. You got the white people's newspaper, which is the Albany Herald, and that's where you get all of your official news and all of these things. And then you have the Negro newspaper, which in Albany is the Southwest Georgian. And this is where you get all of the Negro news, the births, the wedding announcements, the graduations, the funerals, all of it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, it's a celebration of community. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And then, you get to the day of, you know what I'm saying? In Albany, there are 4 high schools. There's 3 now, but it was like, when I was in high school, there was 4 high schools. We all met up at the Civic Center, and depending on when you went, you graduated either at 8:30 in the morning, 2:30 in the afternoon, 4:30 or 7:30. Your girl graduated at 4:30 p.m., May the 18th, 2002. So it was like when Doherty High School was coming out, Westover High School was going in. You know what I'm saying? And then after that, it was like your friends was over there and they were like, all right, you about to graduate? Boom, I'm about to take this seat. And after everybody graduate, where we meeting up for the graduation parties at? Who cooking? Who cooking? So, your people, you would see people getting up because they had to go and cook. You know what I'm saying? And then you be walking around with your cap on, and you know what I'm saying. And if you had honor stoles like your girl did, they had your cute little outfit on with your honor stole on there. You know what I'm saying? And taking people money. Thank you so much. You get this little bit. You know what I'm saying? You got money in one hand, you got your plate in the other. But it's like if you don't give your people the experience to celebrate you, that looks a certain way. So when CeeLo was like, I don't recall ever graduating at all, I'm just like, either he was too gone to remember the graduation ceremony, which is possible, because, senior night turn up is usually the night before you graduate. Or he was like, I didn't graduate. That brings shame, not just to me, but to my family. That idea of guilt, the guilt of it. Going back to that expectation that older generations have. You know what I'm saying? Like it feels bad when you don't do something. You know what I mean? It's a totally different feeling of being hurt and being shamed when you embarrass your family. Yeah. And CeeLo was pulling on that in that verse. You know what I'm saying? So yeah.
I love that. I love that because that was just, when I read the book, like that verse just spoke to me in so many ways. And hearing you talk about it just shows the beauty and the complexity of just those few lines in that one song. But that song, has carried me and so many other folk through hard times, right? And how we deal with that shame and how do we deal with that guilt and how we try to find that joy.
Mm-hmm.
right? By getting up, get out, and getting something, right?
Right.
So, but I also want to, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We're going to turn to the Q&A very soon. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for engaging with us. Please, if you have questions, put them in the chat. But I want to talk about this idea of community, and what you do so beautiful in this book is community.
Thank you.
Right, you bring about these other authors and talk and weave them into these stories, right? And so let's just talk about why you situate Kiese Lemon's work in this.
Well, because Kiese is the GOAT, first of all.
That is true.
Like,
that is true.
There's that part. I just want to
Sip. Come on, Mr. Sip.
All the time, man. Ain't no genius like Black Mississippi genius. It's not even just Kiese. It's Kiese. It's Big Crit. It's Jasmine Ward. It's Crooked Letters. It's all. I mean, like on and on and on and on and on. You know what I'm saying? Ray Shrimmer. They just brilliant over there. I just feel like, what I'm saying, because of all the bullshit that their ancestors went through, they were just like, you know what, we're gonna make y'all just dope here, just right. But I feel like, that sense of community is so important in establishing a Southern Black aesthetic. None of this stuff happens in a vacuum. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, okay, so if it's happening in Georgia, of course it's happening in Mississippi in the exact same way. No. We ain't monolithic over here. We ain't cookie cutter over here. We have unifying threads that put us together, but we not cookie cutter. Right. So I really appreciate the way, I just appreciate the way that Kiese leaves you with brittle bones. He is such a devastatingly honest writer. Yeah. He doesn't shy away from nothing. Right. Like I remember him saying the only place I can be unapologetically fearless is the page.
That's right.
And I was just like, I too want to be unapologetically fearless on the page. Right. So like when I read Long Division, I didn't know what to do with it at first, because I was like, I'm ready to hear a contemporary Southern Black story. You know what I'm saying? And he gave me that. And he gave me hip hop to go along with that. And he gave me the slang. And I was just like, the characters that he described were the characters, my people now. Like, so when I reached out and asked him about it, I was like, was this intentional? And he was like, yeah. So when he opens with bars from 3 Stacks, Aquemini, the actual song, not the album, but the actual song, I was like, wow. So Outkast already has a genealogy that's outside of music. You know what I'm saying? So being able to identify the type of storytelling that Kiese was doing and put it in conversation with Outkast, because he gave it to me. He threw me the bone, so to speak. He was like, here, take this. What you think is going on with this? And I was like, all right, you know what I'm saying? Being able to tell stories that are unapologetically humane, flawed, but humane, is something that we don't usually see in Southern literature when it comes to Black folks, right? Like folks like to think about the William Faulkners, for example, or the Flannery O'Connors, or all of this. And I'm like, they're all wonderful writers, but the way that they talk about Black folks, that is not my South. Those are not my people. My folks are not just a kickstand for you to, recognize that, oh, maybe I have flaws in humanity. And I'm like, what about the humanity of those secondary Negroes? Right. You know what I'm saying? So I appreciated that Kiese put Southern Black people on full display in the same way that Jasmine Ward also puts Southern Black people on full display, like unapologetically put Southern Black people at the front, not in the back, in the front. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I'm just like, all right. So then when I really started to kind of think about this, and actually that's the chapter that, you said you heard me throwing the book around, the Hutchins Center. It was that chapter. Wow. Because I was like, how do I make sure that I recognize the complexity in the way that Kiese is establishing a contemporary narrative for Black Mississippi? Because if nowhere else in the South, Mississippi is the one that's most stuck in this mud and this muck of not being able to be contemporary. Because folks want to stick to Emmett Till, for example.
Mm-hmm.
They just want to stay there. They want to stay there. They want to stay at the Freedom Riders. They want to stay at the folks who were murdered. You know what I'm saying? That's where they want to stay. They want to stay in the type of Mississippi that folks like Richard Wright talk about.
That's comfortable.
It's comfortable. Trauma is comfortable when you're not going through it. You know what I'm saying? It's trauma is the lens that makes folks comfortable. Like, oh, look at them. You see that now. You see that now. Like when we talking about the South and politics, for example, and everybody was like, look at them Southerners. You know what I mean? The South saved y'all. You welcome.
Mm-hmm. Just a few months ago.
A few weeks ago. Over that. Right? Well, you see the South, it's always the South's fault. I'm gonna need for you to actually break that down, please. South meaning what? Who you talking about? Who the hell you talking about? You ain't talking about Southern Black people, because we've been about this political activism, grassroots organizing life. Who you talking about? It's kind of like, how folks have been talking shit about Georgia these last couple of weeks because of this bullshit voter law that they put up, and they're like, well, look at Georgia, and I was like, you want white male Republican Georgians? That's who you want. You don't want us, right?
Mm-hmm.
We try to do something about it.
Make the distinction.
Make that distinction, boo. Because what was happening is, you want to talk about that, but you don't want to talk about folks like Park Cannon,
right?
Who only wanted to see them sign the bill. See,
knocked on the door.
Knocked on the door.
Yeah.
And got arrested. What you got to say about that?
Yeah.
I'll wait.
Yeah.
Crickets. Get out my face. You know what I'm saying? And they want to act like the South is just one thing. That's why I'm like, y'all need to continuously remind yourselves the South is not one universal experience. Because if you're talking to Black folks and brown folks and Asian folks, it's different for us down here.
Yeah.
But you would rather just assume that it's just this collapsed ideology. You know what I'm saying? And that's doing more harm than good.
Yeah. So last question maybe we'll see before we get to the Q&A. Because one thing I really love that you talked about, and we were going to Jasmine Ward's piece, and this idea of the trap.
Yeah.
And a new idea of the trap, right? When we think about trap, we think about drug dealing and that type of life. But you talk about how you're interested in the trap as a space of grief. Southern Black men who feel unseen, or deemed unworthy. Can you, bring that together? How Jasmine Ward's piece and hip hop and the trap, bring that all together for us. Because I love this part in the book.
Yeah. All right. So that was probably the hardest chapter for me to write. So my dad has been gone for 17 years this upcoming December. My dad, you know what I'm saying? We didn't have a perfect relationship, but we had finally started kind of establishing a real close relationship at his passing. You know what I'm saying? So it was difficult for me to revisit that particular moment. But yeah, when I thought about it, I was like, for me to grieve, what was I listening to? I feel like one of the ways to advance conversations about a contemporary Black South is actually listening to the contemporary Black South, the sounds of the Black South, right? Because sound allows us to have conversations and express emotions that language isn't usually adequate enough to do. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, so I was like, what was I listening to when my dad died? And I went back and looked at it, and it was Urban Legend, T.I. All day, every day. I actually found my college journal, you know what I'm saying? And it was quotes from T.I., from motivation to my life, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, you know what? That's crazy. This was I was grieving because Tip was also grieving. And I connected with him on that level. I liked T.I. before that, but I mean, it was different because he was talking about this anxiety and this pain that I couldn't express. One, because I was supposed to grieve in a particular way, going back to those ideas of respectability, you know what I'm saying? Grieving in the South is different. Somebody passes, everybody come to your house that first week, they bring the whole menu of KFC with them, they bring all of the soda section, all of the water, for real, you know what I'm saying? And you just, and it's expected of you to kind of sit there and grieve properly.
Publicly and outwardly. That's right.
Yes, and that means that you don't show any anger or you just kind of sit there and let folks touch on your hair and your arms and just, I'm so sorry. You know what I'm saying? And I ain't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I ain't want nobody touching on me. I ain't want nobody all in my face. You know what I mean? And my grandmother was still in such shock because my dad died unexpectedly. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like, you know, he died in a tree cutting accident. So it was unexpected. And I'm like, all right. But my grandmother just like, I mean, she's like the epitome of a Southern genteel, you know what I'm saying? It's my baby, right? But I was like, Nana, I can't do like you and sit here and be like, thank you so much for thinking. Like, I just sat in my room and blasted Urban Legend.
Wow.
And folks would like come and knock on the door, and sometimes I wouldn't answer it, you know what I'm saying? I just let it knock or whatever. But it was like, it gave me space to not have to be nice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then, you know, as I got older and really started listening to T.I., I mean, like, he was grieving. First, he grieves himself.
Yep.
That survivor's remorse that you hear on his first album, I'm Serious. Like, I got out, at least 1 foot out, right? And then he started using his music to grieve his homeboys and his family and his cousins. And then his best friend is shot to death in front of him at a club in Ohio. And every album after that pays homage to his best friend, to the point where he had grieved enough. He had reached, I guess, the final stage of grief, which is acceptance, so to speak, where he actually reenacts the night that his best friend, Falant Johnson, is murdered in his face on the Heavy Is the Head album. You literally hear this man being shot to death.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next song is him talking to Falant. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah, it talks about the drugs. It talks about all of these things. But I mean, like, trap is also the opportunity to make those feelings and experiences that aren't legible anywhere else legible in this space. And the challenge, I think, with thinking about trap now is that folks want to pick and choose which part of the culture they want to participate in. They want to take the sound, right? So now we got the EDM trap and all, you know, they want to take the sound of it. That's fine. But also recognize the cultural impact of what trap did and why it started.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And even with T.I., I mean, like, I talk about T.I. in this chapter, but I say it in a chapter. I don't think he started trap.
Mm-hmm.
He branded it.
Mm-hmm.
When we get trap music in 2003, we get the album Trap Music. We're like, oh, okay, well, that's what we call it in trap music. But before that, what do you do with folks like Cujo Goody?
Yeah.
Or Backbone, or Cool Breeze, or UGK, or 3-6 Mafia?
Yeah.
What they doing? You know what I'm saying? When UGK talk about Pocket Full of Stones,
mm-hmm.
that don't sound like no gospel song. I mean, you know what I'm saying? This is, what do we do with that? So I think it's important that as we continue to see trap evolve, because trap arguably is the biggest export in hip hop right now.
Okay.
Arguably. You can hear trap in China. You can hear trap over in Kathmandu. You can hear trap in South Africa. A friend of mine was traveling over in Tibet and heard monks making trap music.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like that there's something that is touching these folks to utilize trap that's not just the music. So we have to recognize that. Yeah. And even in the South itself, you know what I'm saying? Trap isn't the same. Trap in Atlanta has multiple approaches. You got Tip, who is humanizing the trap. You got Gucci and Jeezy, who are stoicizing the trap. It is what it is. You know what I mean? Right. Like, I'm out here. It is what it is. And then you got younger generations of trap artists who are talking about being in the trap and using their own supply.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
Medicating on their own stuff. Biggie would be offended. Biggie would be like,
commandments? We didn't give out commandments.
You didn't get the commandments this year.
You know, so last question I want to hit you before we go to the Q&A is
let's do it.
The treatment of women in Outkast's songs.
Talk about it.
When you have like Sasha Thumper, like that, man, when he said, I remember her number
like the summer. Yeah. I went back to the skating rink. Because that was where I was at during the summer with my little, like, I laugh because I feel like kids don't appreciate having your pen, your good pen, the pen that you check 2 or 3 times, and your little scraps of paper.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They don't know about that. Paper They don't know about that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's one thing that I wish I would have paid a little bit more attention to in the book is the role of gender. You know what I mean? But if I did that, we wouldn't have no book to be talking about today. Like, I'm just a perfectionist like that. But it's interesting because a couple of things I think about Southern rap. One, I'm really fascinated by this idea of consent in Southern rap because consent is central to so many Southern rap songs.
Okay.
Ironically, it's also in conversation, and shout out to you know, our squad member, Dr. Treva Lindsay, this idea of melodious misogyny. Like I love, like, girl, I love that T. I love that theorization because it's so useful. It sounds good, but then it also tries to take you away from the harm that's being done in some of these lyrics.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So like with Outkast, it's interesting because they give you that melodious misogyny their entire catalog. Yes, they do. But what ends up happening is you get like, I mean, you know, it was happening before, but you get this post-Badu effect on 3 Stacks that's really fascinating, where his viewpoint about women, I'm not saying that he's feminist, but it gets more complicated. It's not just, oh, she's trying to trap me. You know what I mean? Like it was on like Hootie Hoo, for example. Like he gets the girl pregnant and he's like, and hangs up the phone. You literally hear the click on the song. Right? You see he's grappling with this idea of sex and pleasure and Black women. So by the time you get to something like The Love Below, it's not him questioning where Black women fit into his life. It's where he fit in the Black women's lives. Right. Right. So I think that's, and even to a similar extent with Big Boy, I'm not saying he go all the way, but I mean, like after he has his daughter, you know what I'm saying? He becomes a little bit more conscious about how he's talking about just a smidge, not a lot, a smidge, right? Which usually happens. Dudes have daughters, you know what I'm saying? And now all of a sudden they want to be like, you know, girl dads, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, you need to treat my princess with respect. Woo, woo, woo. You just 9 months ago. Okay, that ended the conversation. But you know what also makes me think about too is this is something too that I feel like I need to address is in the chapter I talk about T.I. I talk about his contribution to trap. I do not stand by the bullshit he's been saying about women, his daughter. Oh, what he said about his daughter, really. And now these new allegations that he's actually been sex trafficking. So he's still like I think that's important too, is the complexity of it all. You know what I'm saying? Like the performativity of it. You got some of these dudes out here being faux teppish. You know, Black women are queens and we gotta treat them like queens until we do something that you don't like. Right. You know, and Fotep, because I mean, like Hotep is a legit Afrocentrist approach. Foteps are them ashy Negroes that be like, you know, they be out here smelling like shea butter and shame. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, oh, you know, yeah, you know, all Black women are queens. And then you get in conversations with like Meg, like the conversations around Megan Thee Stallion and more recently Saweetie and Quavo. It tells me a lot. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That even within Southern rap, we're still grappling with respectability politics. Maybe not as strict in following all the guidelines of being respectable, but when it comes to women and women's autonomy, yeah, we're still struggling with that. So I think that, you know, Sasha Thumper was a theorization for me. Sasha Thumper was a theorization, like when she's like, I just want to be alive, able to speak into existence. And I mean, like, I feel like, I mean, I was thinking about, you know, your book, actually, you know, Hip Hop's Little Sister Speak. You know what I'm saying? Like when we speak, what spaces do we have to actually articulate those truths? Yeah. And what happens when we turn away from a male gaze, which is what Megan is doing, which is what Cardi is doing, which is what, you know, and all of that. And it's not even just them. Like you can trace that back to the Trinas, and you can trace that back to the Mia X's and the Gangsta Boos, and even way before that with the Millie Jacksons and the Bessie Smiths and the Ma Rainey's. None of this happens in a vacuum. If there's nothing else that, you know, y'all take away from this talk, nothing that happens in the South is a vacuum. Right. We are not linear down here. It is cyclical. Right. It happened in 1858. It came back around in 1972. And guess what we're doing now in 2021? Here we go. Where we at? You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I mean, like it's just important. And that's definitely something that I'm playing around with for the next project, is paying a lot more attention to Black women and how Black women connect to Southern rap and what that has done for us as a means of escape, but also as a means of accountability. For how we move in the world. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so let's get to some questions. You got some good questions in here. I'm gonna go ahead and hit a refresh on the document so I see what's popping, what's new. We got some folks. Okay.
What callers we got on the line, beloved? What callers we got on the line?
When I think of Southern hip hop, I think of trap music. In Gucci Mane's autobiography, he claims that he created trap music, but T.I. also says he's the father of trap music.
No.
What do you think about this debate? What is your opinion? How do you sit on this thing?
Neither one of them Bama started trap. I think that they pioneered in different ways. Yes, I'm not taking away that, but I don't think they started it. I think T.I. branded it, and I think Gucci created the brand for Atlanta trap because Gucci was out. I mean, and actually, if you really want to get real with it, if you want to think about who branded trap, I mean, he branded trap music for everybody else, but in Atlanta, I think about Cujo Goody and Thought Process on the Soul Food album where he talks about the trap. But you know, it is what it is. So I feel like it's not about who started it. It's more so what direction did you push the music in?
Right.
Because if T.I. and Gucci are in that conversation, you need to put Jeezy in that conversation. And even more specifically, you need to put these producers in that conversation. Like producers are not, it's kind of sad, man. It's like, why don't you include producers in the conversations about who started trap? Because if you're thinking about like DJ Toop, for example, or Shawty Red, you know what I mean? Shawty Red crawled so folks like Zaytoven and Lex Luger and them could fly. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like it's more complicated than that. You can go all the way, and then going back to Atlanta, all the way back to 1989, 1990 with Kilo Ali and Cocaine.
That Joker did make a song called Cocaine.
There's a white girl. I mean, like, it's like you go to the skating rink. I'm like, oh, cocaine. You know what I'm saying?
And that voice.
Kilo Ali got the sing-songy voice. You know what I'm saying? It's real. Okay. So, I mean, like, you know, if you're in Tennessee, you're gonna be like, DJ Paul and them started trap.
Right.
3-6 started trap. Or if you're in Texas, UGK. Again, pocket full of stones. So I feel like it's more complicated. You know what I'm saying? But in terms of branding trap music, I will give that to Tip.
Okay. All right. We got.
That's about all I'm gonna give him at the moment.
I mean, yes, right, yes. We have a question from a brother that I love, Emmanuel Little.
Hey, Dr. Little.
He says, Dr. Bradley, as someone who's from the hashtag not Atlanta GA.
Macon, stand up.
How do you make sure the experiences of Albany and other small or other rural areas aren't forgotten in the discussion and music and culture, with Atlanta being basically the epic center of everything?
Yeah, man, especially in Georgia. It's like, you know, it's one of those things that make me want to throw hands academically, of course. Is, oh, where you from? I'm from Georgia. Oh, what part of Atlanta are you from? I ain't say I'm from Atlanta. I said I'm from Georgia. Right? I feel like part of that is actually paying homage where homage is due. I'm from the Benny, so all day, every day, I'm going to represent for Phil Mob. Period. Right? I think being able to recognize the distinction between the urban South, so shout out to Imani Perry and her theorization of the urban South and Prophets of the Hood, the rural South, you know what I'm saying? There's a distinction between those things. In Georgia, it's in the perimeter, which is Atlanta, and outside the perimeter, which is where your girl is from and where Emmanuel is from, right? So I feel like these discussions need to be in tangent with each other and not collapse into Atlanta is the biggest be all end all representation for Georgia, because it's different. You know how many different Georgias we got down here? We got Northern Georgia, which is like up North Georgia, Gene Toomer, Kane, Georgia, rural Georgia. You know what I mean? You got Atlanta, which is this nice little metropolitan hub. You got Middle Georgia. You got Southwest Georgia. You got Southeast Georgia, because now you going to the coast. You know what I mean? It's different. You know what I'm saying? Folks from Savannah will fight you if you try to be like, oh, they're from it. I mean, like, Seaport hit different. Chatham County is different than Doherty County, than Bibb County. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's important. And is being able to recognize and just accepting the fact that the South is not monolithic.
Yeah.
The culture that comes from the South isn't monolithic. The way that we talk about those things, even within the state, if we want to go to Louisiana, for example, what's popping in NOLA is different than Baton Rouge.
Right.
No less significant, but different.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I think probably on top of that, thinking about, Emmanuel's question a little further is, we still need to have conversations about how Katrina changed everything for the South. It physically, emotionally, psychologically, historically reconceptualized what Southernness is. Yeah. Because you got displaced people who, some of them can't go home, who are now taking root or rent because I'm country in these different states, but they're not just bringing their bodies with them. You know what I'm saying? They're bringing the culture with them. They're bringing the food with them.
Yeah. And I think also another point is to make is what's happening in Atlanta now, right? The gentrification in Atlanta.
Listen,
the being Black folks being pushed out of this city. And so Atlanta demographics are changing. I mean, this is one of the fastest growing cities and one of the fastest cities for gentrification in the country. So
which is kind of wild to me, though.
10 years ago, and you think about Atlanta now, oh, this city looks totally different.
Child. I mean, like, and especially as somebody who grew up in Georgia. I mean, like, for forever, Atlanta was my New York City. When you wanted to go to the big city, you took your ass to Atlanta. For real. It's like you wanted to have the new fit for school that you thought nobody else was gonna have. You didn't just stop in Macon. You went all the way to Atlanta. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. To do that. And I was just thinking about it. I'm, watching the news. It's like you hear about these complaints from folks who are living in these historically Black neighborhoods and then getting in their feelings when folks are doing historically Black shit. Like, this is what we do over here.
This is ours, actually.
We go out in the street and do the neighborhood cookout. We play the music. We push the speaker out the window.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. All the way up. Yeah.
People over here, well, what about property values? Well, what about people values, sir, ma'am, them?
Community values.
Community values.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's just, Atlanta in particular is this really fascinating moment because it's like, yeah, we got a Black mayor, but you also got white folks who are trying to tell the Black mayor, you don't need to do this, this, and this. It's really interesting that this is a reflection, and shout out to Maurice Hobson in Legend of the Black Mecca, because I mean, like, he really breaks this down, right? But when we think about how Atlanta propagandizes itself as this epicenter of growth, they are going for a particular demographic.
Yes. They've been selling that dream for a long time.
They selling it, baby. They selling it. Like they was like, no, this is the dream that Dr. King was talking about. The one where, we can all just live in the same neighborhood and you don't appreciate what made the neighborhood exist in the first place. Of course, we want to talk about the AUC. Do you know how mad I was when I heard they sold the West End?
Yeah.
You know how that's historically Black. Like the West End, you go down there for your shea butter, your new Black art, your new Black books, a fish plate. So, you know what I'm saying? Right? But they're like, oh no, we needed to make, affordable housing. Affordable housing for who?
Right. That's code for y'all. That's code for Negro removal.
Get the hell out of here.
That's James Baldwin. When you hear that, that's Negro removal.
Wildin', you over here paying $2,500 a month in rent off of Lowry Boulevard on Vine Avenue.
All right, hold on. We got another question for you. I recently read the paper you co-authored, The Wings of Trap Atlanta, for a paper I was writing. It was amazing to see how you perceive Du Bois's criticism of the social economic goals of the Black community in Southern hip hop. Is this conversation in your book? How do you see it as part of the narrative past the three pillars?
So no, it's not in the book. I feel like shout out to Dr. Seneca Vaught, who was the other author on this piece. I feel like that was really all him, was the Du Bois breakdown there. And I didn't want to, we don't steal no credit over here. We don't steal no ideas over here. But I do think that Du Bois is a really interesting context for Atlanta, especially thinking about what it was trying to do back in the early 20th century. Because you can remix that to have conversations about Atlanta's increasingly quick gentrification, right? As the city on top of the hill, you know what I'm saying? And how folks it's interesting how folks want to talk about how that preservation looks like. And what comes to mind for me is Morris Brown College. And it's not just because, my husband is an alum of Morris Brown, you know what I'm saying? But also, Morris Brown was literally in the heart of the city almost. And now they only have one building left. And right up the street is, in some instances, what used to be dorms from Morris Brown across the street is the new Mercedes-Benz Dome. You know what I'm saying? And pushing those folks out, right? So when I think about Du Bois's warning about Atlanta being this city on the hill and not falling prey to the shiny things, you know what I'm saying? Something that, Goody Mob warns us about, you know what I'm saying? Only pay attention to the shiny things, you know what I'm saying? Is part of that. And I think, what's interesting, if we think about hip hop as a culture, bringing in the pillars, of course, you got like the artistic elements of it, you know what I mean? But for those of us who study the culture, we've introduced the fifth element, which is knowledge of self.
Yes.
And knowledge of self and knowledge of place. And I feel like as an academic, the challenge for me focusing on the South is that we are so quickly changing, is that it's hard to document knowledge of place.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you listen to early 90s and early 2000s rap coming out of the A, they're giving you Thomasville Homes. They're giving you all of these places that no longer exist.
They're gone. Yeah.
They haunt the music. They make the music an archive.
They haunt the music. I love that.
They do. Like these places that made Atlanta the one without no T's. Because you have Atlanta. Which is the one that folks are more comfortable with, the Peachtree Roads and all, that Atlanta.
The Ponce.
Ponce. And then you got the Atlanta with no T's.
Mm-hmm.
The one that Donald Glover pulled from for his show. The one where you never see not damn piece of the skyline. Nothing of that. They're like, nah, we're going to take you to these other neighborhoods.
That's right.
That make you uncomfortable. So when you get to that point where it's like, oh, I don't understand Mechanicsville, Adamsville, the Villes. I didn't understand that there was this part of Old Nat-El,
right,
or Campbellton Road.
I didn't see the housewives there. Are the housewives there?
Right. You know what I'm saying?
Is this where Nene is? Right.
They're like, well, that's just Atlanta. No, it ain't just Atlanta. I can even bring your girl in there, Queen Bee. When Beyonce came out with Lemonade, folks lost their mind. Because she up in here giving you Southern Black woman everything.
Yes.
And folks like, oh, that's a thing? Like, that's... Beyonce's not just talking to just anybody in the Beehive. No, she's talking to Southern Black women.
That's right.
And what Southern Black women go through. And again, the only one who can make Jay-Z a video vixen. But we ain't here for that. We ain't here for that.
But then see who she ushers in, right? And here she is, right, looking at Meg getting a Grammy, like, oh, it was just a gushing moment to see those two. Because
two different generations of Houston.
Yes, of Houston. That's right. But hold on, before we get into another question, Dr. Morgan is watching.
Hey, Dr. Morgan.
And she says, I'm so glad this is being recorded. You two are fantastic. The depth of the cultural analysis is mind-blowing. So I just want you to know.
You had us up there, Dr. Morgan.
I want you to know that's what Dr. Morgan said about us. But no, this is, that just coming from Dr. Morgan, that's just the highest compliment and just speaks to the volume of this book. That's just beautiful and amazing. So thank you, Dr. Morgan. We really love you and appreciate you for all you've done to just
all the things.
Yes, not only the culture of hip hop, but just us as Black women scholars. Just thank you for the space and opportunity. Our time at the archive was monumental for our career. So
listen,
that's a big thing.
Yep.
So the next question says, if you were to paint a picture of your vision for 2025.
Ooh, child, I can't think of it. We in the Pangea, but okay.
would it look like?
Well, we wouldn't be in no parallelogram no more. That's the first part. My Delta app would stop uninstalling itself. That just broke my heart, man. I was like, don't leave me. Don't. But seriously though, I would like to see more scholarship about the South from other Southerners. I want to see more. I don't believe in the Highlander shit. Right. There needs to be more than one. I can't talk about Tennessee the way that Zangio Robinson talks about Tennessee. I can't talk about Houston and Texas the way that folks like, Langston Colin Wilkins and Mako Faneuil talk about Texas. I need more. So by 2025, I'm hoping that this door is open enough for more scholarship on the Dirty South.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I'm super excited because there's graduate students who are doing Southern rap. So shout out to folks like Adaria Johnson, for example, who's doing Dirty South feminism. You know what I'm saying? All of these folks, like, they are doing the work. That's what I want to see. I don't want to be the only one. I don't want it to be 2025 and we're still like asking what role Southern rap plays in hip hop culture at large. I want to be like, well, I said this, but you also should check out all these other folks over here.
And you do a beautiful job of that page 101 of your book, just listing the folks who have came before you, the folks who you pay debt to, and then also, like you're saying, like academically, the South is underrepresented when we think about these texts. And so you think about the whole world, right, rocking to Southern hip hop, loving Southern hip hop. Where's the scholarship?
Where the scholarship at? From Southerners. No offense to everybody from the South, but I'm like, yo, y'all can't rock about our shit the way we can. That's like me going up and be like, oh, well, this is what music meant to the rock, Tina. Tina goes to be like,
oh, get on it.
You know what I'm saying? Something else I want to see in 2025. I need more queer women talking about the culture. Queer folks, women folks. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of this being a male-dominated space. Sick of that shit. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares, Shawty? I just find it hella ironic that there are so many men in hip hop scholarship and hip hop studies when it's Trisha Rose who helped us get here in the first place. Okay, all right. But yeah, I hope I answered your question, Jeff. That's what I want to see. I want to see more women. I want to see more queer folks. I want to see more conversations about region and how we understand hip hop. That's what I want.
All right. Last question. I'm gonna read it to you. I'm not sure where it's going, but last question.
All right, talk to me.
I want to see your mixtape collection. All right. On one hand, each tape is the product of an individual selection, showing skill at recording the songs, creating a personalized narrative through songs. Then there are traded and meant to be shared. How do you balance the individual and community functions of those recordings and their circulation and cultural conversation? Somebody went deep.
Well, one, I miss mixtapes. Most of my mixtapes are gone now because I've moved 11 times. But I might get lucky and find one or two at my Nana Boo's house in my room. I still got my room in my Nana Boo house. But yeah, I feel like, the individual aspect of it is there's a particular message you're trying to get across to somebody.
Yeah.
So I had mixtapes depending on how I was feeling in my spirit. And this is something I actually been sitting with Tina. And I really want to hear your thoughts on this. It's like, you never feel the music like you do when you're a teenager. Because all the hormones is popping. Everything is just like on 11 million. So it's like, I just felt the music different. And contrary to popular belief, I'm a hip hop scholar, but I'm an R&B soul. Like, I have realized how much I love R&B. Like, it's part of my spirit.
That's right.
So it was like, depending on what I was trying to do. If I was trying to keep up with them cafeteria peer review conversations.
Cafeteria peer review conversations.
The cafeteria table was my first peer review experience. You ain't coming up in here and you ain't do the work.
Hey.
You ain't do no work. That's like if I came over to the athletes table and y'all was talking about the game the night before and all I did was watch the highlight, that one shot, you gonna look at me like,
come on, man.
Go on now, go on. This is grown folks conversation. Like that. You know what I'm saying? So I think that, mixtapes were currency.
Yeah.
That's how you got your foot in the door. That also showed how you showed improved. That's where your receipts come from. Your peer-reviewed sources for the songs that was on that tape.
And your technical skills.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you couldn't have too much. It couldn't be, I mean, the transitions had to be perfect.
You be ready to fight if somebody come in at the end of the song and you be like, what are you doing? The song is still on. You be like, yeah, that was
You gotta start over. You just gotta start over.
All over again. But in terms of, community function, that's how community for me was established.
Yeah.
Sharing the mixtapes. I miss being, going between classes, fourth period was lunch, you know what I mean? And seeing folks, some folks had to run a lunch, there was athleticism of lunch. But it was also like, you see your boo or you see your friend and you just like, this is the moment. This is the moment for me to, share this little note that took me all of third period to write. And also give you the tape associated with the note. And then, you be sitting in fourth period like, I wonder if he reading it.
What he gonna say?
And then be ready to fight him when he give you that one sentence back. You be like, I wrote you 5 pages. All you can give me is 2 sentences. Some bullshit. But yeah, I feel like that was grounds for community. And I think the additional part of that is playlists don't quite work the same. I feel like mixtapes were that physical embodiment of community building in ways that playlists aren't. I mean, playlists are more accessible, you know what I mean? But I also think too that it reflects the way that we listen. Because when you're listening, I mean, when you make your mixtapes, you were critically listening. You were listening for a particular bar. You were listening for a particular sound, a particular saying, right? It makes me think about, concept albums. You know what I mean? That was regular. You had your beginning, you had your interludes.
Yep.
You had, your skits. I miss skits and rap. I miss having skits.
The other day. The Fuji skits were so good. I was listening to the Fujis the other day, like, oh my God. It was so good. It was hilarious.
To this day, Outkast and the Stankonia skits are perfect.
Yes.
When I hear some cut up, I laugh every time because it reminds me of three-way and you calling with your friend and you learned how to play the game because if they sounded kind of distant, your immediate reaction was who on the phone with you? But it's like concept albums aren't a thing anymore. Albums are getting shorter.
Oh my
God. An album now was like 4 songs. You like 1, 2, 3. That's it.
That's it.
By the time you finally starting to feel it, it's over. Right? There's not really no skits. There's no, you know what I mean? And you can pick and choose on your streaming services.
Yep.
I like track 3, 10. Oh, even if you go that far, I like track 3, 5, and 8.
Yes.
So when you get something like a To Pimp a Butterfly or a Lemonade or something, you know what I'm saying? Where you can't just pick and choose what you want to listen to. Then folks want to lose their mind. Oh, this is amazing. Well, if more folks would go back to concept albums, your mind wouldn't be blown every time K-Dot come out with something. just because he gave you a complete project. I'm not saying that he ain't dope. He's dope. But I mean like a complete project.
Start to finish.
So
I listened to Janelle Monáe this morning. A concept album. Start to finish. Beautiful album. Like she's Cindy Mayweather on the run. Like, yes, that's a kind, like, oh my. Yeah. So we got the last question up in here.
Okay.
It says, thank you both for all that you do. We love you.
Thank you.
I'm a professor of social work from Georgia and would love to hear your thoughts on how social work scholars can embrace and contribute to the scholarship on hip hop and social issues.
Woo. I am definitely not a sociologist. I don't want to sit here and act like but one thing I think about, and this is something I use in my Outkast class, so this might be helpful, is when we do critical listening journals in my class, well, before the panini, we would come and have a conversation and have a listening day. And students would tell me where they were. Like when I'm like, what are you listening to? Why? What stands out? Because usually that opens up more conversations. You know what I'm saying? And also encouraging students to listen in totality, not just to lyrics, because I feel like lyrics are a cop-out for a more in-depth conversation, because you have the lyrics that are telling you one story and the producer is telling you a totally different story with the background accompaniment. You know what I'm saying? And just asking, I mean, like, how does this make you feel? What stands out? Why do you, even if it's something that they don't like, why? Like, why? You know what I'm saying? Asking stuff like, would you share this with your bestie? Nah, I want to share that. Well, why not? Let's talk about it. Right? So I feel like being able to have overlapping conversations and also getting away from the idea that critical conversations only exist in the academy.
Yep.
I feel like with my book, I intentionally disrupted that narrative that you have to be removed from the research topic in order to deliver something critical and noteworthy, so to speak. I'm all, like you said, I'm all up and through that book. Like, I feel like I tell a lot of, you know what I mean? But I also feel like that grounds why the music is so important.
Yeah. So last question, this is from me.
What
are you listening to? Getting you through the panorama. What are you listening to?
Man, I'm playing catch up right now. You know what I'm saying?
Me too.
But honestly though, like I've been in an R&B zone this last couple months. Been listening to Giveon. Oh my God. Giveon. I have an unhealthy obsession with Division at the moment. You know, kind of just going back and listening to things, been catching up on like Janae and all of them folks, you know, her. Also been listening to a lot of Spillage Village and Earth Gang these last couple months, man. Crit. Love me some Crit. Crit is all the things, right? But yeah, just, I mean, like, you know, that's the one thing that folks don't understand. Like, I've been writing this book since 2015. So I was like, I mean, like, of course I love Outkast, right? Like all Outkast. I mean, like, I was in a particular time period. Like, I was trying to keep the context there. You know what I'm saying? So it's refreshing to kind of see what's being listened to. And then, of course, my students are like, Dr. B, you need to listen to this. So,
right.
Yes, I mean, like I've been on my R&B kick. I've been revisiting some of the oldie but goodies. I was a huge Drew Hill and Ideal fan.
Not Cisco.
Let me tell you something. I mean, having conversations about the ooh yay versus the nay who. You know what I'm saying? I feel it's regional. All the ooh yay folks got Southern roots. So that's what I'm. Who you listening to?
Man, let me see. I've been going hard on Anderson.
Yes.
Leave
the door open.
I love his music. I've been bumping Janelle Monáe hard. You know, I never stopped listening to Beyonce.
Never. I know.
I found myself the other day, like 2 weeks ago, playing No Name's first album, and I wouldn't stop playing it.
Okay.
I just wouldn't stop playing No Name's first album. And I've been trying to get the kids to listen to Jadena.
They want to listen to Jadena Finance?
You
mean like old stuff or like 85 to Africa?
85 to Africa.
Oh, it's beautiful.
85 to Africa. Like I've been, they are.
Come on, niecey and nephew. Come on, Chance.
They feeling me, but they not feeling me on that. Okay. They like that turn up. They want that turn up.
They there now. Oh, okay.
They're there now. So I just want to say how beautiful it has been to spend this time, how beautiful just your presence is. I think people read the work and it's beautiful, but people don't know how funny you are. People don't know like how charming you are and how infectious your laugh is. And so, I hope folks at home just saw just this brilliant scholar who is also a beautiful human being and someone that I love and just cherish, not only for your work, but just who you are as a person. So Thank you, Hutchinson Center, for having us.
Thank y'all for letting us be foolish.
Yes. Thank y'all.
Thank you. This was really, really tremendous.
We loved it.
And Dr. Bradley, I look forward to your next book. And Dr. Love, I look forward to your visiting us with your book next year. And both of you, please come visit us virtually, physically, anytime.
Yes.
We'll do. Y'all are family. We love y'all. Always,
Yeah.
always,
Love
always.
you
Thank
too.
y'all for having us.
You guys are the best.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
you,
so
thank you,
much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Everybody, be well.
All right, you too.
Wear a mask.
2 masks.
Always.
Peace, y'all.